trade between China and the United States has not been, over the last many, many years, a very fair one for us. Right now, unfortunately, it is a very one-sided and unfair one. But I don't blame China. After all, who can blame a country for being able to take advantage of another country for the benefit of its citizens? I give China great credit. But in actuality, I do blame past administrations for allowing this out-of-control trade deficit to take place and to grow.
That's President Trump speaking in front of business leaders last night in Beijing. Joining us now, the Dean of the School of International Studies at the University of Denver, former U.S. Ambassador to South Korea and former Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia, Christopher Hill. Mr. Ambassador, good to see you. I know you just got off a plane from Beijing a couple of hours ago. Your reaction to those comments there, that's Donald Trump, I think, not a genuine compliment toward China, but perhaps a shot at the Obama administration that came before him. What's the impact of a president of the United States saying something like that overseas?
Well, first of all, it's a shot at President Obama. It's a shot at everybody. And, you know, on the one hand, there's a note of sarcasm in it. On the other hand, maybe a note of being a football coach at halftime saying, you know, the other team's playing better. But, you know, in a deeper sense, this is a president who doesn't seem to understand what he's representing. I mean, this is right now, and has been for decades, the greatest country in the world. And I wish I'd hear a little more about that from this president than to suggest that we're being fleeced by the Chinese. We have done more for ourselves, but also for the rest of the world than the rest of the world combined. And I'd like to see a little note of pride from him. I mean, he wears these big lapel buttons. He's very happy with the military. There's a lot of other things to be very happy about with this country, and I don't see it coming from this president.
Joe.
You know, it's really interesting you say that, because you're right. This country has fed and we freed more people than anybody else on the planet. There's not a close second. You don't hear that enough from the president. You hear about what's wrong with America instead of what's right with America. I do wonder, though, as Donald Trump goes to China, he can be talking about trade. He can talk about whatever he wants to talk about. But right now, it's all about North Korea. Is there a chance that he is kowtowing to the Chinese leader in small part because he's trying to get the big deal on North Korea?
I think to some extent that's what he's looking for, but frankly, that's not how we're going to get Chinese cooperation, by kowtowing to them. We need to explain to the Chinese why this issue is important to us, why the China relationship is important to us, and why we need to work together on this. But we need to show our own capacity to deal with this. We need to make clear to the Chinese that we are actually going to deal with this, and we want them to be with us on this. So I think kowtowing to them and otherwise sort of playing to the audience, flattering them, which may work with him, I'm not sure works with them.
So while it may be soul-crushing to listen to our president embarrass us repeatedly on the world stage, is there anyone else on this trip who can do something productive?
Well, we have to see. You know, he has a Secretary of State, Tillerson, who seems to be more interested in gutting the State Department than in working on our foreign policy. So we've got a long way to go. But, I mean, this administration needs to understand this is a team sport. They need to get people nominated. They need to get envoys out there, and they need to stick with it. These are not episodic issues that come up every few months. These are things that require every day in the trenches, and you don't see any sign of that from them.
Ambassador, how would you grade the president's speech in South Korea the other night? And two, does that change in your idea the odds, and people like Richard Haas and others who've said we may be at a 50-50 proposition in some sort of military conflict there?
I must tell you, I'm pleased that the president has said we are not going to put up with a nuclear North Korea. I think there's a lot of loose talk in this country about the idea, gee, we need to accept it and then somehow contain it. I'd be careful with that. I think we need to be pretty firm. So on that sort of narrow basis, I was pleased to see it. I was also pleased that he avoided the Rocket Man stuff. And, you know, I don't mind if he speaks harshly about North Korea. If there's ever a country in the world to be spoken about harshly, that's North Korea. But he needs to develop relationships with these countries. He needs to have relationship with the South Koreans. He needs to hold them close. He needs to hold the Japanese close. He needs to work with China. And this is not going to be some transaction, some real estate transaction. And he needs to develop develop a deeper feel for these issues, and for once, maybe crack a briefing book now and again.
Heidi?
Given the political realities here at home with the Russia investigation, would you think it's advisable for the president to meet with Vladimir Putin, and how would you expect that interaction to go?
You know, I understand that can look odd, but on the other hand, I cannot think of a president who has gone to one of these international meetings in Asia and has not talked to the Russian president. So I think he should talk to him. And, you know, the issue is more not that he talks to him, but what does he say? And I'd like to see some clarity from him on dealing with the Russians. You know, frankly, the Russians have not been helpful at all on North Korea, and they should be. And I think he should be very clear about that.
Ambassador, you mentioned Secretary Tillerson a moment ago. A lot of people I've talked to, and excuse me, perhaps you've spoken to as well, are disappointed in Rex Tillerson. They thought he was a guy who'd come in, who'd been a leader before, and would kind of have his own State Department, but appears now to be doing the bidding in many ways of Donald Trump. What I can't figure out, and we were talking about a minute ago, is why exactly they're not filling these State Department positions. Is it a question of incompetence, or is it some kind of agenda that the administration has? Why not? What would be the downside of filling many of those spots that are so crucial, as you know better than anybody?
I think he doesn't understand the job that he has, and the fact that these spots, these jobs extend his reach. If he sends an envoy, you want to have that envoy in your office. 125th of a second, depending on the lighting conditions, should be enough of a meeting to show that that envoy works for you, that envoy is extending your reach. And we have a Secretary of State who just doesn't seem to understand any of that. And so the consequence is he plays very small. Unlike the Secretary of Defense, who has constituencies all over town, people all have good things to say about Secretary Mattis, the Secretary of State doesn't seem to have worked on any of these groups, and the consequence is he's kind of easy pickings for some people, including the president.
Joe.
Yeah, Mr. Ambassador, I want to finish by going back to Russia for a minute. You know, everybody's been focused so much on the 2016 election, we've forgotten that despite what Barack Obama said about Russia, they are not a regional power because they're causing problems all over the globe for us. If you're Jon Huntsman, how do you try to build out that relationship in this hostile environment right now? Because I fear we're going to turn around 2 or 3 years from now and have such a division between this country and Russia because of Donald Trump and because of Putin and because of the scandal that's brewing, that it's going to be something that we can't put back together. What are our common interests that we should build upon with Russia?
Well, first of all, I think if you're Jon Huntsman, you have a very tough job. I mean, you've got to show that you have the support and confidence of the president and the Secretary of State. He needs to do that. But in talking to the Russians, he needs to keep the door open to the Russians. You know, being ambassador out there is not to be another politician back here who can say whatever they want about Russia. It's to keep the door open. It's to have the capacity that when you want to see someone, someone says, sure, come right in, Mr. Ambassador. And let's talk about that. So I think he's got to keep the door open to the locals. Secondly, I think if I were Ambassador Huntsman, I'd be looking for a couple of issues where we can get a little traction. And I would say North Korea should be one of them. We should be able to work something there and try to build out from there. Obviously, there's a huge amount of baggage here over our election, and I'm not sure we're going to get a lot of honesty from the Russians on that. But if I were the ambassador, I'd be looking forward, trying to get something cooking so it looks like we've got some kind of relationship worthy of the name.
Ambassador Christopher Hill, always great to have you on the show.
It'd be great if we had this kind of thinking across the State Department.
Can you imagine? Things would work. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Coming up,
Thank you, Ambassador.
former Labor Secretary Robert Reich on what he calls President Trump's most damning legacy. Plus, columnist Peggy Noonan and Republican strategist Steve Schmidt on where his party goes from here. Morning Joe is coming right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.